Late last night I felt the call, leaned against the bedroom wall, swore I heard the prairie wind blowing, blowing.
We're honored to have two very special guests with us today that are in very different ways drive Wyoming's business future. Our first guest is Brent Hathaway. Brent, who is the Dean of the University of Wyoming School of Business. And although Brent's academic and professional accomplishments are impressive, it really pales in comparison to the success of partnership that Brent has built between the Wyoming business and the academic community. And joining Brent today, we also have Neil McMurry. Now, Neil really needs no introduction, as he is a legend in the Wyoming business community. He has not only just done business in Wyoming, he has helped the state prosper and grow. Neil's commitment to his family, his community, his employees, and business has helped everyone around him prosper. With that, please join me in welcoming Neil McMurry and Brent Hathaway.
Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be in Cheyenne this morning with the Chamber Partnership. And what a great breakfast. Not every day you get steak and eggs. Well, it's an honor for me this morning to be visiting with Neil McMurry, one of the business legends in the state of Wyoming. I've prepared a number of questions for Neil, and at the conclusion of my questions, we'll open it up to the crowd for them to go ahead and ask some additional questions of Neil McMurry. We have one of our recent grads here who's also a granddaughter, and I would suggest to you that we have a bright future in the business community in Wyoming and the Rocky Mountain region based upon the graduates that are earning degrees and going back out into the workforce. Over half of our graduates remain in the state of Wyoming, and so I have the opportunity to work with them, and I'm grateful for that. Let me quickly get on my computer here, and Neil, time for you now.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to go back in time and begin with a question about your youth. You were a product of the Great Depression and grew up with very little. Can you tell us about your memories from that period?
I wasn't any different than the rest of the country. It wasn't anybody had anything, so we didn't know any difference. It wasn't like today when some people have a lot. It was a good way to grow up. You learned to deny yourself. You just did without. You didn't complain. You just didn't have it. That's about all I can tell you about it.
You had lots of company, huh?
Yes, we did.
When you were a young man, you joined the United States Army Air Corps and served overseas during World War II. What were your responsibilities during the war?
Well, I had joined to be a pilot, and they didn't call me, and they didn't call me. By the time they did, well, the pilot schools were all full, and they took a bunch of us and made gunners out of us. I was a gunner on a B-17 bomber, and we flew out of England, bombed Europe. I was in the ball turret gunner in the bottom, about half the missions, and the rest of them in the tail.
Okay.
It's all the same, I guess, except you couldn't get out of the ball turret.
That was the one at the bottom, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What did you learn about yourself during this really difficult time?
I learned right away I made a mistake when I volunteered. I found out they were playing for real over there. My brother was in Iceland, Greenland, in the Signal Corps. He wrote and told me, he said, "I'll see you soon." I joined the paratroopers. And I think I was one of the few letters I wrote him through the war. I said, "They're using real bullets over here. They're killing people. Stay where you're at." Fortunately, a horse kicked him when he was a kid, and he didn't have any teeth, and it wouldn't take him.
After the war, you returned home to Wyoming and raised a family. What was it like going from fighting for the American dream to living the American dream?
I don't know that I ever noticed the difference. I had a family while I was in the war. My oldest daughter was born. Her daughter sitting out there amongst the crowd in 1944 while I was overseas. And I was just like the other 10 or 15 million people come home with, looking for a place to get started, to make a living, to feed the family. And it was, well, I don't know, the hours were about the same. They were pretty long both places. So I don't see a lot of difference, okay. Except they were shooting at me.
Tell us about the highway construction company you built.
I came home in 1945 in September, and I had a year-old daughter and a pregnant wife and 2 suits of khakis they gave me. And I know, Gus, didn't they give us $300 or something? That's all I had. We didn't have a house or a car or anything. We were kind of poor. And I went to work for a gentleman named Vern Rissler. He was a great guy. He had a small tractor. He was building reservoirs for ranchers, leveling land. I worked for him a couple of years, and then he and I formed a partnership at the end of '47. And we built reservoirs till about '52, and we began to run out of work, so we qualified for the highway department and started bidding highway work. I think the first job we had was in '53 in Fort Bridger South, and from there it just grew and grew.
Well, is it true that you and your company actually competed against your own flesh and blood for jobs? And related to that, because I think it is true, how did this situation come about, and how did you handle the famous family gatherings?
Well, I had a couple of rotten kids that tried to put me out of business. They had worked for the company off and on, going to school, scraper and dozer, drove truck, and my oldest son came home from Vietnam. The youngest son was just getting out of Laramie school, and they wanted to go to work for me. And I said, you know, I have one partner. I don't need another one. And you guys will learn a hell of a lot more if you go out and make it on your own. So unbeknownst to me, they went down to Nebraska and leased a scraper. And I'd be the first to admit that probably most kids off the street couldn't lease a brand new cat scraper, but they did. I didn't know they were doing this. And they started stripping pits for, including myself, land leveling. And they began to do highway work, and next thing I know, they're a prime competitor. But it really never caused any problems. We were truly bona fide head-to-head competitors, and it was good for them. It made them learn how. So it worked out pretty good.
It did.
The best part of it was when I finally drove them out of business.
Neil, you've been described as a true American entrepreneur. What qualities do you have that helped you succeed when so many have failed?
I'm not sure I can spell entrepreneur. I don't know that there's any magic to it. You get up early, you stay up late, and work every day. do what you have to do and work as hard as you can, be honest, and treat your competitors and your employees like you want to be treated. And there's really no magic in it. It's just if you work all the time, it usually comes your way finally.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Jonah Field. What is it about this field that attracted you, and why were you able to make it work when so many others had failed before you?
Well, I'd have to give credit to the gentleman I had hired to run the oil company, John Martin, who was in Denver looking at property that was for sale. And John had one time or another been a logging engineer for Schlumberger, and he looked at the logs and determined that they were passed up gas wells, which nearly everybody knew that, but you couldn't figure out a way at that time to make it produce. There was a young engineer, I think James Shaw, worked for one of the service companies, had experience over in Rifle, Colorado, fracking a tight sand like that with nitrogen, liquid nitrogen. The problem with that sand, it had clay in it, and when they fracked it with water, the clay swelled. So the first well that we fracked, we used nitrogen, and it was mostly on the recommendation of James Shaw. And it worked well, and the rest is history.
Let's talk about that. When you eventually realized that the significance of this natural gas play, what were your first thoughts? And related to that, what did you do to celebrate?
I don't remember we did anything. We just kept on going.
Kept on going. Did you have any feeling of the impact this would have on the state of Wyoming?
Not at that time. You know, when you start out, you don't know the extent of it. We re-entered 3 old wells, and by virtue of the 20 or 25 years, the heat and the pressure had healed them, had dried the sand out, and the clay had shrunk back down. They came on, the 2 of them came on very well. My son went over and laid 10 miles of pipeline on top of the road, top of the sagebrush, and they produced so well that we stepped out and, well, I guess we fracked one of them with nitrogen, and it worked well, so we stepped out and drilled the well, first one. And I asked my son, I said, well, what was the geology on that location? And he said it was roadology. The road went over there. And you know, as fate would have it, at a later date, the only dry hole I remember we drilled in the field was the same distance from that good well south that we went west. Had we gone south with the first well, we'd have walked, because we had a dry hole. So that was the stroke of luck that Irish people have once in a while.
What makes Wyoming special regarding doing business in this state?
Oh, there's several things. The tax climate, of course, is one. The quality of the people, the honesty of the people is another. I would guess there's probably a few states in the Union left that you could shake hands and do $1 million deal and walk away feeling good about it. Just a pleasant place to do business. I can't really describe it more.
Reflecting on your years of doing business in Wyoming, what advice would you give to other business people like we have in this crowd?
I wish I was that smart. You just operate fairly and Work all the time at it, I guess. That's the only advice I know. Don't give up, never quit. You just, no matter how bad it gets, keep going. It'll finally turn around.
Okay. How would you characterize the current business climate in Wyoming?
I think it's very good, and especially compared to other states. I think we, in North Dakota, we have an operation up there, are the two shining stars in the whole country. And of course, they're both energy related. I think Wyoming has a secure future. The world is short of energy, and we have lots of it. I just, there'll be some blips, Roy says, but I just don't believe that we'll ever have a severe downturn in the near future in Wyoming.
You've talked a little bit about the future of our state and your optimism about that. Let's talk also about some of the pitfalls that Wyoming needs to avoid to continue this successful run.
Well, the age-old, keep your taxes low. One thing that we are all cursed with right now is overregulation, both state and federal. They are just killing us with regulations, and it's not only the regulations, it's the enforcement. They're getting tougher and tougher, and it just, you almost get a feeling they're trying to put you out of business. That's their goal. And we just have got to get some relief on the regulations, both locally and federally.
You've had, throughout your career, some difficult times. Business is cyclical. Talk about how you handled not the peak, but the troughs, when things were really tough. How did you handle those situations?
When you get your hat in your hand, you go to the banker and see if he'll let you operate for a while. I didn't notice it. I've never let the moment that you were at influence me too much. If we had a pretty good bank account, or if we were down to nothing, just keep doing the best you can every day, keep working, and it kind of flattens out on the end. I don't recall that we ever had any euphoria when we had a good year, and we didn't cry when it got bad. We just kept going.
You've experienced significant success, yet you refuse to slow down and enjoy the fruits of your labor. At this point in your career, what is it that keeps you motivated?
Oh, a lot of things. I have a lot of good people, a couple of hundred left in the construction company. A lot of them been there for a long, long time. Most of the early ones are retired already. I like to see them keep going, and I think probably the biggest thing that keeps me going is accomplishing things. We have this new development out south here that's been very gratifying. It's coming along. We have the business park in Casper, and now we have an operation going in Williston. And I think that the sense of satisfaction that you get when you accomplish something.
As you travel the state of Wyoming, it's been said that you built most of the roads and highways in this state and then went back and resurfaced them when they needed it. Do you, as you travel the state, do you feel a sense of pride as you travel these different areas where you had a hand in providing this great infrastructure? I
do, and we built so many roads sometimes I have a hard time remembering just when or what we did, but I do get that. That's part of the thing that keeps me going.
Your business success has positively impacted Wyoming and its citizens in many, many ways. When it comes to giving back, which you do regularly and often, what is your philosophy about giving back?
When I was a young lad delivering papers downtown, I knew all the business people, and several of them died and left their money to General Rose Hospital in Denver and other universities, pardon me, out of state. And even as a boy, I thought to myself, if I ever make any money, I'm going to spend it in Wyoming. I'm going to leave it here. And that's always been my goal, that money made here should be left here, used for common good.
Well, thank you. And I know you pass that on to your children as well. Many think our nation and our economy are on the decline. How do you see our current situation, and what do we need to do as a country to move forward?
Well, I don't think there's any question we're on a decline. Part of it's been the government action over the last 50 years. More giveaways, more all the time, more take care of people instead of forcing them to work. I don't know that there's any way the attitude of the American people, a lot of them, how you can change that decline. They've made up their mind that the world owes them a living, and they're going to get it one way or the other, I guess. If they have to camp out in Wall Street to get it, they're going to do it. I don't know. I don't feel very optimistic that it's going to get a whole lot better. I hate to say that with all these young people out here, but it just there aren't any signs that I see that the country, the people are ready for a change. They want to go on the same old way, you know, more and more for less and less, and it's finally you just can't redo that. If you would just fast forward us, we'll be where Greece is today. We'll be having riots and all kinds of bad things will happen, but I don't know how you impart that to the people.
Let's go back in time. What prompted you to get, if that paper route was the first job, what prompted that and what motivated you?
Well, I didn't have any money. And I wanted some. I guess it's like Al Simpson said, it's good old-fashioned American greed. That's what prompted me. And the more I got, the more I wanted, so that kept me going.
Well, I have one closing statement and then one question. Then we're going to turn to the audience members for additional questions. But there have been a lot of things that have troubled me as well as you, I'm sure, in terms of unethical business practices in recent times. Also unethical practices by sports heroes, politicians. Doesn't matter. There's a difficult run behind us. And it's refreshing as I visit with your colleagues and your family members to hear about a successful man with high standards for both yourself and those that you have around you. My final question is, it's been said that a handshake from Neil McMurry is better than any written contract. I've heard that a lot. Why is that?
I guess they've never caught me cheating. So that's just the way I've lived my life.
Okay. It's recorded in a book, which I'll mention right now for those of you who would like to have a little more insight into Neil and his life. It's called Hurry McMurry, and I know Susan's here. I had a chance to read through this. It's a joy to read about his background. But one of one of the elements in this book describes a senior official over the Department of Transportation who knew there were design flaws in a job that you had built, and went to you knowing full well that those design flaws had caused you a great deal of money in terms of correcting that problem and completing the job, and went to you with the normal request. Well, actually, it's not a normal request. Typically, when firms bid those jobs, they make a lot of money off change orders or problems in the design, and that's one way they increase their profitability. On the other hand, you refused to go request additional funding for a problem that had been clearly on the part of the design engineers. Talk about that situation. Again, that's what prompted my last question. Talk about that situation and your business philosophy.
I don't remember what situation it was. I'm sure that I could make it work without any additional compensation, and I didn't want to catch a guy bent over backwards and take advantage of him. They were always fair with me, and I was fair with them. Tried to be.
Well, you were fair with them. As reported in this book, not only were they troubled by that, but they actually went and requested additional funding without you involved, because they felt like that was their liability, and you were a man who was good to his word, and I think that story in itself embodies a lot about what we need to remember in the business communities around Wyoming, and I want to thank you for being a fine example of one who works hard and has a moral and ethical standard that allows you to have great relationships with those you do business with. So I want to, on behalf of future generations of business leaders, I'm pleased. I know you're not happy there's a camera here, but I'm thrilled because you are a standard in that behavior, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. But I'd like to have you know that the book started out as a family affair. The kids wanted some record of what had happened to me in my life, and they hired a historian, and she really grabbed the bull by the horn. She interviewed a lot of old highway engineers that I'd worked for 40, 50 years ago, and she interviewed two of the crew members that were on the bomber that I was on, and she just had a multitude of people that she talked to, and I didn't realize they were going to publish it and circulate it in the end. I wouldn't have told so many lies.
Well, needless to say, I didn't get this book from you. I got it from one of your children, and it's a treasure for me. And when we wrap up today, I'd love you to sign it for me. But at this point in time, I'd like to transition into some questions from the crowd. And Dale, would you like to help facilitate that?
I'm wondering about what your family was doing while you were achieving all these things, and what was the role of your family and your other partner and your spouse, etc. Can you talk a little bit about, did that help you achieve what you did, that you had their support?
Did you hear the question? So talk about your family and the role of your spouse and their support as you pursued your dreams.
Well, needless to say, I was gone a lot. Rissler, my partner, and I had an understanding early on that he would take care of the office and the shop, and I would take care of the field work. And we lived true to that the 33 years we were partners, and it worked well. But all the time that I was gone, my wife managed to take care of the 5 children, and she did an excellent job with it. She brought them all up the way they should have been brought up, and I just saw them occasionally, but she was a good trooper about it. I kind of preconditioned her. I married her and then went off to war for 3 years. So she was used to me being gone. So. But she was a good trooper about it, and thanks to her, the children all grew up without getting into a lot of trouble. Didn't you, Susan?
Yes, Father, she says. Next question.
I'm wondering if you could address how you assess risk, especially in this business environment when we see so many businesses fearful of expansion, and we see all over the state of Wyoming your influences in our community where you're expanding and you don't seem to have that fear. So I'm wondering if you could explain how you quantify that risk.
Did you hear the question?
No.
Okay, so the question is, how did you assess risk as you think about growing your business? And clearly there's difficult times now, and you seem to move forward in spite of those risks. So how did you think about business risks and make decisions to expand?
Well, that's one of the advantages of not being too damn smart. When you're young, you think there's probably very, very few obstacles you can't overcome, and you just jump in with both feet and think if you work hard enough, it'll come out in the end, and it always did. I did take some terrible risk, and so they all turned out okay. I mean, not all of them, but most of the major ones did. You assess the risk in your own mind. You look at the pros and the cons, and if you decide to do it, why, I guess in your own mind you've assessed the risk and found it acceptable, you go ahead and do it. But I'm no whiz at it.
Next question.
Neil, how do you assess the importance for ongoing diversification in our economy? We're heavily, obviously, reliant on energy and so forth. What's your visions as far as the next 20, 25 years as far as what we need for diversification?
Well, there's no question that Wyoming needs to get off the energy kick. Hopefully our development down south will begin to move in that direction. At this time, we have another company wanting to come. It's a manufacturing company we can't disclose, but I see more and more of that, people wanting to come here to manufacture, and I think it's primarily because of our low tax rates and low energy prices. And I don't know how you encourage them. We do all we can. We meet with people and encourage them to come buy a piece of land from us. But there's a lot of handicaps in Wyoming. Of course, we're far from the market, and sometimes we're far from the raw materials. But we have two rail parks, one here and one in Casper, and I think with the high price of transportation and diesel, I think they will become increasingly important in locating factories and diversified businesses here. We're doing all we can, and thanks to the Business Council and LEAD, they are doing a great job in trying to direct people into Wyoming to move some other businesses here. And I have hopes that in the next 10 or 20 years that we will increase our diversification away from the energy sector.
A related question would be, talk a little bit about Swan Ranch and how that development came to be, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, my son-in-law came to me about 11 years ago and they said that the Warren Ranch was to be for sale and maybe we all ought to buy it. So we got together, my daughters and he, and I bought it. And at that time, his business plan said in 8 or 10 years we would develop Swan Ranch. And that's kind of the way it came. We could see that it was a prime location with 2 interstates, 2 railroads. And finally the time came that I decided to do it, or we decided to do it, and it was quite an undertaking, and I think it's probably greater than he ever envisioned it would be. Bringing the railroad in was the major event. We moved about 2.5 million yards of dirt down there and laid, I don't know, 20 or 30,000 feet of track, or we will have when we're done. At first, the Union Pacific was very cold. They didn't hardly talk to us. And one day they looked over there, and there was the Burlington, and so they, hey, let's go to lunch. And now the UP is coming, so we're going to have an interconnecting line between the two railroads. And it just has really exceeded my expectations, the amount of interest they had. There's so many places in the state and the United States, there's very little rail access available. And we not only have access, we have a lot of open land that they can start with a clean sheet of paper and do whatever they want. And it really is an attraction to people, because in the big cities, you know, they're all hedged in. There's very little open land left. We have the Geestop, which is a Spanish company, in Worthington, which is an Ohio company, coming. They're going to build wind towers and components for the wind generators. They put their whole factory back on hold till spring. I guess they're having some internal complication. But there's several other companies. The Jebro is the asphalt arm of Knife River. They bring asphalt in here, they buy it in the winter and store it, and they blend it, and they make emulsions or going to. There's several businesses like that. To me, there's some diversification from the oil and gas and coal business. But I think as the word gets out nationwide, there'll be more and more national companies looking to locate right down here in Swan.
Another question from the crowd.
Neil, I wonder what your secret is in working with the federal government, meaning the BLM and the Forest Service, when you are going to drill or lay pipe. And my question refers back to a time when you were wanting to lay pipe and it was on the ground for months waiting to get a permit, and that's reflected back to regulation. And so a relationship with the federal government, and how do you get through that?
Have a lot of patience. It's an ongoing problem. It's becoming increasingly more difficult, and as I say, the main purpose that they have is they act like that to slow you down or put you out of business. It's going to have to come from the feds. Congress is going to have to relax some of these rules. And it's just so oppressive, very difficult to operate. And they're holding a lot of drilling up, a lot of projects that could move forward. Without Congress, why, I don't know how it'll ever get changed. So the next time you go to Congress, why, talk to them.
Time for Dale. Are we okay for a couple more? A couple more questions. Yes.
Yes, I don't have actually a question at this point. I represent the South Cheyenne Community Development Association as Assistant Secretary and Board Member, and South Cheyenne as the association would like to thank Mr. McMurry and Mr. Samuelson for their vision for South Cheyenne, because our theme has been Discover South Cheyenne ever since 1995. And it has taken a lot of years, but the growth and the planned growth and the new business park is going to make our entire community a very, very worthwhile place to live. And I'd like to thank Mr. McMurry and Mr. Samuelson for their foresight.
You're very welcome.
Related to that comment, it's often said that it speaks volumes about a man or woman who will plant a tree under which they'll never be able to enjoy the shade.
Be a what?
You've been planting a lot of trees that you won't be able to enjoy the benefit of the shade when they grow. And I think that's really the thank you from this fine lady who thanked you for your work here. And talk a little bit about that. It's really, clearly there's a business motivation for some things, and sometimes the business rationale may not be as strong. But, and I'm talking again back to your desire to give back to the Casper community, which has benefited greatly. Talk more about what inspires you to give back.
Yeah, just would like to leave a better place than you found when you came, and I'm not sure we're going to do that, but that would be my goal. I would rather use the money to help the people in Wyoming than let Mr. Obama take it away. So. I have a lot of family in the state, and whatever I do benefits them along with the rest of the people. And that's one of the things I think about is trying to make a community, the state, better than it was. And I think we've helped that some.
Yes, you have. Okay, and one more question. Dale, did you have anything you wanted to ask Mr. McMurry? Okay. Susan, do you have a final question for your father?
Not that I can say in public.
Okay.
I do have, would you talk about the McMurry Training Center and the single-parent family training you have at Casper College?
Talk about what?
The McMurray Training Center and the
Single-parent training at Casper.
Are there any Casper College professors in the crowd? Doris and I had given a pretty good chunk of money to Casper College, and we wanted to do two things. One was the single parent program, which is working very well, and the other was to help the daycare center at the college, which they have done. And the rest I wanted in vocational training. But since I am not a college graduate, I have a different view of it. The Casper College people thought you ought to learn American literature and American history and English literature before you learn to weld. And I said, no, here's a guy that has a family. He needs a job and he needs a check. But they were very reluctant to put any of it in that until you take the other courses. So the Contractors Association had a program for apprentices, and the foundation that they'd started, and Charlie Ware was running it, and he asked me one day, he said, what can I do to get this going? And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $50,000 if you could match it. And lo and behold, that broke the ice, and they jumped up to 150. So we decided to start the McMurry Training Center, and then myself and Doris and my family gave them additional funds, and thought it was a worthwhile adventure for the industry, the state of Wyoming, the city of Casper, and it's turned out very well.
Yes, it has. I see Katie in the crowd. She and I toured that together once. All right, well, let me wrap up our formal questions with my gratitude. Thank you for sharing your insight and your experiences of doing business in Wyoming. It's often said if you can leave a powerful legacy behind, you've done good in the world, and you have, Neil. I want to thank you for not only your impact on Wyoming, but the additional generations that you'll influence for the better. So with that, please join me in giving a hand to Neil McMurry.
Well, he's been an old pal a long time, and it's great to hear him, and his comments today were fantastic.
Neil McMurry is certainly a Wyoming legend, and his practical, common sense, homespun advice was very much appreciated.
We had a great breakfast this morning with Neil McMurry, who's a legendary businessman in the state of Wyoming. We're very pleased to hear him talk about the hard work and character that took him to be successful.
I thought this was a fantastic visit with Neil McMurry to hear his insights on Wyoming's economic climate. I'm just thrilled that I was able to attend.
Back to Cheyenne.